Everybody is talking about Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. Did she lie? Did she misrepresent herself? Should she be held accountable? And all of these questions, they really do matter. But after watching the conversations on the podcasts and listening to bloggers and just watching this whole conversation unfold, I've become more interested in something else. I'm interested in the people defending the behavior that they admit may be wrong. So, why do we make excuses for people we admire? Why do we make excuses for people that are bloggers? Why do we ignore red flags? Why do we ignore red flags when they're attached to someone we like? And at what point does the support become enabling? Let's talk about it. Hello, thank you so much for joining today. My YouTube channel, Ask Lois the Relatable Therapist. My name is Lois Goodell, and this channel is all about positivity and mental wellness. And I get my inspiration from reality TV, social media, from blogs, podcaster, or anything that I think is going to help me to help you to have positive mental wellness. And I just want to just thank all my subscribers out there for subscribing to my channel. Go ahead and hit the button so you can know when I go live again, and so you won't miss any of the content. And please subscribe to this channel, because your subscription to this channel encourages me to continue to make these videos. So let's get started today with one of our topics. Today I want to address something that has been going around viral across social media, and that's the controversy surrounding Cheyenne Bryant. And the controversy has questions about her educational credentials and her professional titles. And over the past several weeks, I've watched numerous bloggers, podcasters, and even content creators discuss whether she has accurately represented her qualifications. And many of the conversations have focused on allegations that she may have misrepresented herself as a doctor or as a psychology expert. And while others have focused on the details of her credentials, what has really captured my attention, has caused me to pause, is something entirely different. And that's the response from her supporters. And what amazes me is not necessarily the allegations themselves, but the number of people who acknowledge that there may be some inconsistencies, and then they immediately follow it with, but I don't see the harm, or why does it matter? And as a therapist, that response caught my attention because it reminds me of a concept that we often discuss in counseling, and it's called enabling. Let me give you a definition. An enabler is someone who knowingly or unknowingly supports harmful, destructive, or unhealthy behavior by shielding a person from the natural consequences of their actions. While enablers often have good intentions, their actions can actually allow problematic behavior to continue. So today I want to talk less about Cheyenne Bryant and more about the psychology of enabling. And there are 4 characteristics that I want to talk about that let you know if someone is an enabler. And so the first characteristic of enabling is shielding someone from consequences. And this happens when people protect an individual from accountability or attempt to rescue them from the fallout of their choices. And we see this when people say things like, oh, they're just trying to keep Black people down, or they're trying to take away her money, or everybody makes mistakes. But accountability is not oppression. Holding someone accountable for their actions is not the same as attacking them. If someone desires a particular credential, a title, or a profession, there's a legitimate pathway to earn it. And accountability simply means being truthful about where you are in that process. And so shielding someone from the consequences and protecting a person from experiencing the natural results of the consequences. Let me give you an example. So let's say, for instance, a college student repeatedly fails classes because they rarely attend. And instead of allowing them to deal with the academic probation, their parents continuously call. They call the professors, make excuses, and blame the school. Consequently, the student never learns accountability because someone is always stepping in to rescue them. And if we apply this to a public figure, if someone is accused of misrepresenting their credentials and their supporters immediately dismiss all concerns without examining the fact, they may be shielding that person from accountability. So rather than encouraging honesty and transparency, they are keeping them in the state that they are in. And again, that's not helping them. So the second characteristic of an enabler is making excuses. And this occurs when people minimize concerns or redirect attention or even create justification for a person's behavior. And this should be examined more closely. I've heard people compare her use of the title to a doctor, to Dr. Dre, Dr. Seuss, or Dr. Pepper. But these examples are stage names, brand names, or fictitious titles. The concern people are raising is whether a professional title is being used in a way that can lead others to believe someone possesses credentials that they might not actually have. Some people may ask, well, what's the harm? But trust does matter. If you sought services from someone believing they possess specific qualifications and later discovered that they didn't, how would you feel? Would you simply shrug your shoulders, or would you be questioning? I wonder what else they have been misrepresenting. So making excuses and justifying or minimizing or rationalize questionable behavior is making excuses. So for example, a spouse repeatedly spends money irresponsibly, causing financial hardships. And rather than addressing their issue, their partner says, that's just how they are. They're under a lot of pressure. They're under a lot of stress. And guess what? The problem is going to continue. And why is it going to continue? Because the excuser replaces accountability with making excuses. So let's just say if we have a public figure, people might say, oh, everybody lies sometimes, or she's helping people, so it doesn't really matter. And while those statements may seem supportive, they can minimize legitimate concerns. They can minimize concerns about honesty and professional ethics. And again, it's really not helping the person. The third characteristic of enabling is when you take responsibility for things that the individual should be responsible for themselves. When supporters spend more time and energy defending questionable behavior rather than encouraging accountability, they are unintentionally removing the need for self-reflection and personal responsibility. So when you take responsibility for things that they should be doing themselves, you're enabling them. An example of this would be an adult child repeatedly misses work because they oversleep. Their parent continuously calls the employee, pretending there is an emergency. Instead of learning responsibility, the individual learns that someone else will clean up the mess. And if we apply this to a public figure, supporters spend more time defending, explaining, and justifying a person's actions rather than spending time addressing the concerns. In that situation, others are carrying the responsibility that belongs to the person involved. And once again, you're really not helping them, you're enabling them. The fourth characteristic is avoiding conflict. We see this a lot. Sometimes people see red flags, but they choose not to address them because confrontation feels so uncomfortable. And instead of speaking honestly, they minimize concerns to keep the peace. So they avoid the conflict and they ignore the problems and ignore the red flags. So an example of this would be a family member notices a loved one drinking excessively, but says nothing because they don't want an argument at family gatherings. The silence allows the problem to continue unchecked. And if we apply this to a public figure, someone may privately believe there are concerns about a person's conduct or claims, but refuse to speak up because they fear backlash from followers or being labeled a hater or being labeled as your jealousy. Avoiding the conversation may feel easier in the moment, but it does not address the underlying issue. Okay, so now that we've discussed enabling, I think the important question becomes, why do people do it? Why do people enable people? Is it because they admire the person? Is it because they find it difficult to believe that someone they respect or someone that they love could be dishonest? Is it because they have a sense of loyalty? Is it because they believe that criticism is unfair? Or is it simply because they like the content and don't want to talk about the issue any further? Only each individual can answer that question for themselves. But from a mental wellness perspective, enabling rarely helps anyone. In families, we often see destructive patterns continue. We see it continue for years because loved ones refuse to address unhealthy behavior. And instead of confronting the issue, they protect the individual from consequences. And unfortunately, the behavior usually doesn't improve. It usually just grows and continues. The same principle applies in public life. When people are consistently shielded from accountability, they may begin to believe that their actions are acceptable because there have not been any meaningful consequences. And true support is not blind loyalty. True support is honesty. True support is accountability. True support is caring enough about someone to tell them the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And if you genuinely care about someone, whether they're a family member, a friend, an influencer, or a public figure, the most loving thing, I sound like Michael Jackson, don't I? That you can do is encourage integrity and accountability, not enable behavior that may ultimately harm them or people who trust them. That's not hate. That's not jealousy, like it's been said. That's not trying to tear somebody down. That's what a healthy relationship and healthy communities look like, being able to hold people accountable. You see, one of the most important lessons in mental wellness is understanding the difference between supporting someone and enabling someone. Supporting says, I care about you. I want you to succeed. I believe you can take responsibility. I will tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Enabling says, I'll protect you from consequences. I'll make excuses for you. I'll ignore the red flags. I'll help you avoid accountability. And healthy relationships require both compassion and accountability. Because when accountability is removed, enabling often takes its place, and growth becomes much more difficult. That's true in families, in friendships, romantic relationships, workplace, and even in relationships when people have influences and public figures. And so I want you to just take some time and think about, am I an enabler? And if I am, why do I enable? Because enabling doesn't help the person. You think it does, but it really doesn't. So write it down below. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And remember, make mental wellness a priority and not an option.